The biggest news today came from the Eastern Front after the Ukrainians captured the western bank of the canal. They launched the next phase of the operation and crossed the canal and began to besiege Khrushchevka. After the Russians lost control of the forest, the defensive lines weakened because they did not come under crossfire. At the same time, the Ukrainians could not easily get a supply because they had full view of the surrounding area. To exploit this weakness, the Ukrainians heavily bombed Andreyevka, the main logistics center of the Russian group here all the time now, was working in favor of the Ukrainians while the Ukrainians were operating in another region. The Russian supply there gradually decreased. So the best time to break through the Russian defense has come. The Ukrainians used their tanks to quickly break through the Russian positions, advance as fast as possible, and render the Russians unable to even counterattack. The tanks advanced very quickly, and using high explosive shells destroyed Russian trenches and other fortifications. Each tank attack is immediately followed by an infantry attack, thus clearing all enemy positions with the advantage of the Ukrainian army. At the moment, the defense of the Russian army on the Eastern Front will collapse completely. According to the latest reports, the collapse of the Russian army's largest defense line in the region is only a matter of time. If the Ukrainian soldiers continue to attack with this determination, it will be very difficult for the Russians. It is only a matter of time before the city of Bakhmut falls again. The Ukrainians have now managed to advance about 2 kilometers towards Khrushchevka and have surrounded the Russian flanks. This is extremely important news because there were only 2 strong fortifications on the southern flank of Bakhmut. One is located in the south of Khrushchevka and the other in the west. At the moment, the advance of the Ukrainians by 2 kilometers indicates that one of these fortifications has passed under the control of Ukraine. The rate of Ukrainian tanks was so rapid that the Russian army did not allow it to use even the strongest positions in this area. Then the 3rd Assault Brigade began to clear Russian positions. Then the Ukrainians would advance by clearing the positions. The Ukrainians had a very important position that would enable them to besiege Khrushchevka from behind in a short time. If the war in the region is a Ukrainian soldier, he announced that they cleared the Russians in all the forested areas in the region as the latest update. According to Russian sources, Ukrainian artillery shelled this area so violently that the ground would split open. In addition, if the Ukrainian soldiers seize the most critical position of the Russians in the hours ahead, they can gain full control of the region. According to analysts, Ukrainian forces adopt a slow and steady win strategy based on slowly forcing Russian forces to deplete and saving towns. Kiev's troops are adopting a strategy of forcing a slow depletion of Russia's manpower and equipment, according to a recent assessment by Washington-based think tank the Institute for the Study of War. Analysts point out that Ukraine's current pace of operations is not a stalemate or an indication that Ukraine will not be able to retake large areas. This assessment is also in line with the recent statements of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Zelensky emphasized that Ukraine aims to liberate the areas under the control of the entire Russian army, while also emphasizing that they care about protecting the lives of as many people as possible, noting that progress may be slower than expected. "We can't throw our soldiers into battle. We didn't see them as supplies like Russia's soldiers," Zelensky told Spanish journalists last week. "Our army is our treasure. That's why we are advancing carefully," said leader Zelensky. Although progress is slower than expected at the moment, Ukrainian troops are constantly advancing and displaying an aggressive stance. It was also revealed that Ukrainian troops carried out counterattack maneuvers in 5 different sectors of the front line and were advancing around the war-ravaged eastern city of Bakhmut. Russian military bloggers reported that the Ukrainians recaptured an important hill near the village of Kaliska, southwest of Bakhmut. Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Maliar also confirmed that Kiev troops are advancing towards Bakhmut's southern front. According to an earlier update by Maliar, the Ukrainian military recaptured an area of 14 mi in intense fighting last week. Also, Ukrainian General Alexei Gerasimov said they had recaptured 9 settlements and an area of more than 60 mi since June 4th. Meanwhile, Ukrainian troops launched missile attacks targeting Russian positions throughout the entire front line over the past day. Targets also included an important ammunition depot in Makivka and a train station in Donetsk. According to Maliar, 6 enemy ammunition depots were destroyed in the rear region. A high-ranking official said that these attacks were a response to the enemy's frontal attacks and were effective and critical blows aimed at the exhaustion of the Russian army with a lack of ammunition and fuel. Chief of the British Defence Staff, Admiral Sir Anthony David Radakin summarized Ukraine's counter-offensive strategy as wearing down the defense lines of the Russian forces with hunger, tension and coups. Ukraine took a longer than expected counterattack in early June due to delays in the supply of equipment and ammunition from the west and adverse weather conditions in the muddy terrain. Zelensky said he wanted the counteroffensive to start earlier and demanded that the Allies speed up their arms supply. "I wanted the counterattack to start earlier because everyone understood that if the counteroffensive started later, our land would be mined more," Zelensky said. Difficulties on the ground caused the Ukrainian troops to slow down in the counteroffensive. On the other hand, the most mysterious commander of the Russian army is still missing. General Sergei Surovikin, known as General Armageddon, has not been seen for almost 2 weeks and is unable to attend his wife's birthday party, raising concerns. This reinforces fears that he has been purged. General Sergei Surovikin has not been seen since June. 24 servicemen who disappeared after Yevgeny Prigozhin's unsuccessful coup attempt is thought to have been liquidated, with speculation that he knew about the Wagner Group's plans. Almost 2 weeks after 56-year-old Surovikin's last appearance, his wife, Anna's birthday absence raises some question marks. According to various reports, Surovikin was arrested last month and is said to be under interrogation after publishing a short video. He called on the rebels and Wagner to stop their rebellion. US intelligence sources confirmed to the New York Times that a leading Russian general was involved in their plans. If he is still alive and found guilty, Surovikin could face a serious charge and face up to 20 years in prison. Apparently, Surovikin chose the side of Prigozhin during the rebellion, and they captured him, a source explained to the Moscow Times. Explaining, another source close to the Russian Ministry of Defense confirmed that Surovikin was arrested, but stated that even the details were not discussed inside. Conflicting theories persist about locating Surovikin, but a former Georgia national security advisor claimed that Surovikin's condition was not going well, especially after he missed his wife's 4th of July birthday. Russia expert Georgy Revishvili added that even Surovikin's family stopped communicating with their closest friends and colleagues. Fighters of an organization called the Russian Volunteer Corps claimed responsibility for the attack. The fighters called on the Russian nation to rise up against the despotic regime in one of nearly a dozen videos that were quickly broadcast as the raid continued. According to the news on Russian and Ukrainian Telegram channels, it was reported that those who define themselves as Russian freedom fighters opened fire on the villages of Kazinka, Glotov, and Goropodol. Official Russian state television reported that Ukrainian saboteurs seized the public event building in the village called the House of Culture in Goropodol regional government. Vyacheslav Gladkov said in a statement that Russian troops and intelligence agents are trying to eliminate a Ukrainian sabotage group that crossed the Russian border. Vyacheslav Gladkov later announced that 8 people were injured. Gladkov added that the authorities helped people leave the scene of the conflict. Russia's defense ministry claimed that it had destroyed a Ukrainian nationalist formation that launched an attack a few miles beyond the border and killed more than 70 fighters in the process. Ukraine denied involvement in the attacks in Belgorod. Ukrainian presidential advisor Mikhailo Podolyak stated that they are following the attacks in the Belgorod region of Russia with interest and are examining the situation. However, Podolyak said that Ukraine had nothing to do with the attacks. In a first since February 2022, Russian authorities introduced a counterterrorism regime that requires the implementation of a number of restrictions and measures, including enhanced security and communications, which gives the security services special powers. The pro-Russian information platform Redevika claimed that Ukrainian-backed saboteurs suffered casualties, but Redevika provided no evidence. Sherbakova, one of Russia's leading propagandists, participated in a special news program broadcast throughout the country. Skoblikova said that the events in Belgorod are extremely worrying. A shocking and brutal war is going on. In addition, photos and videos about the attack were shared simultaneously on Telegram channels. In a photo shared on Telegram, armed men were holding a flag from the Belgorod People's Republic. Another photo showed the flag hanging from a bridge allegedly inside Russia. Other content, gleaming on Telegram channels and regional news platforms, showed Ukrainian tanks, lightly armored vehicles, and vans, and armed men allegedly involved in the attacks. Images emerged in the late afternoon of huge queues of special vehicles heading east, with Russian light armored vehicles heading towards the border to counter geolocated. Videos from the nearby town of Guyuan showed the nest of Russian aircraft, including a Russian Mi-8 attack helicopter flying at roof level next to an apartment building and firing defensive flares. A pair of Mi-28 helicopter warships hovering over the city center. A video that has not been geolocated showed footage of a Ka-52 warship as the aircraft was heading west towards the battle. Other posts that surfaced on social media reported that unknown voices had hijacked Belgorod Oblast radio channels, declared a state of emergency, and opened artillery fire on unknown targets in the given area. Russian military blogger Igor Strelkov said the attack force was less than 100 people and was a mix. The Russians are fighting in the Kraken, a Ukrainian special operations unit deployed by Kharkiv, a volunteer contingent of former commandos and SWAT police living in northeastern Ukraine. Simon Pegov, a pro-Russian war correspondent, stated that the turmoil on the border was a raid aimed at distracting Russia's military leadership and creating internet content that embarrasses Russia. Meanwhile, amid the media frenzy about the entry of anti-Putin Russians into the territory of the Russian Federation, Kirilo Budanov is calling on Russian soldiers to surrender. Budanov stated to the Russian soldiers that they have a choice. That option is to die or save their life. Budanov referred to the state project Taiwan to Live, which explained to the RF soldiers how to surrender. In an interview earlier this year, Budanov stated that he was delighted to see attacks on Russian soil, although he could not take responsibility. On the other hand, images appeared on social media where two pro-Ukrainian Russian partisan groups allegedly used several vehicles donated by the US during a cross-border attack on Russia. The Pentagon has stated that it does not allow equipment to be transferred to paramilitary organizations other than the Ukrainian armed forces. Regarding footage allegedly showing US-made armored vehicles seized in Russia during this week's cross-border operation, Ukrainian Defense Intelligence Agency spokesman Andriy Chernyak reported that Ukraine did not provide any equipment to the militia. The use of such equipment in Russia would be contrary to the purpose for which it was supplied to Ukraine. By way of context, the United States has provided or promised more than 2,000 Humvees and more than 500 MRAPs to Ukraine. Among the $38 billion in security aid given to Ukraine since the beginning of the Biden administration, Ryder said that the United States has regularly contacted us to use the security assistance we provide to Ukraine for them to use within Ukraine, as part of their efforts to defend their country and sovereignty. US President Joe Biden expressed a similar sentiment during a meeting with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky regarding the recent supply of F-16s to Kiev. Biden recently told reporters that the United States, along with its allies and partners, will begin training Ukrainian pilots on fourth-generation fighter jets, including F-16s. Biden added that he had received firm assurances from Zelensky that they would not use it to travel to Russia's geographic region. We'll have to wait and see if questions about the use of this equipment will lead to an official Pentagon investigation, or if it will tighten cooperation with groups such as the Freedom for Russia Legion and the Russian Volunteer Corps in Ukraine. But given the fluidity of combat and the sheer amount of equipment supplied by the US on the battlefield, this is something that will likely come up again before the conflict ends. In another development, sources close to US intelligence indicate that the Ukrainians may have launched a drone attack on the Kremlin. The source's allegations include speculation that some members of the Ukrainian military and intelligence bureaucracy are carrying out the operation by Ukrainian Special Operations Forces. The conversation, combined with other communications from Russian officials, blaming Ukraine for the attack and wondering how it happened, had led US officials to consider the possibility that a Ukrainian group may have been behind the May 3rd incident. Two drones took off that morning. It crashed towards the Kremlin's Senate Palace and into the top of the building. However, officials stated that the United States could not come to a definite conclusion about who was responsible and made an assessment that a Ukrainian group could be behind the incident. US officials believe it's unlikely that senior Ukrainian government officials, including Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, ordered the attack or knew about it in advance. Recent US intelligence reports have assessed that Russian officials have speculated privately as well as publicly that Ukraine was behind the attack. This led authorities to believe that the incident was not a state-sponsored deception operation aimed at giving Russia pretext. This attack further escalated Russia's war against Ukraine. A source familiar with intelligence claimed that the Kremlin made some internal security changes in response to the attack. Looking at the allegations and the attacks, Vladimir Putin's war has already spread to his own lands. It is a fact that attacks are expected to increase in the coming days. We will wait and see what the Russian leader's reaction will be to this situation. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on your notifications. Thank you for watching us.